Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has told Parliament that the amount of electricity generated by solar panels is affecting revenue collection. The country has seen small-scale embedded generation increasing by no less than 350%. As Stellenbosch University Centre for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies Chief Engineer Monique Roux joins us. Monique, good evening. Thanks for your time. It comes as little surprise, right? Because I think just over the year we've been noting the rate at which renewable energy is being brought on board, particularly by households who are quite frankly fed up with the lack of electricity from Eskom.
Absolutely. Good evening, Kathy. Thank you for having me on the show. Yes, we've seen since the start of this year a 350% increase in solar PV generation. That's private generation where businesses and private households generate their own power using PV on their roof or standalone systems next to their factories or their businesses. And this is probably going to increase as time goes on. We've seen for the first couple of months of the year exponential increase in the installation of these PV panels. Eskom released their own report in July where they said that they saw the increase in this year of 4,400 megawatts of own generation, which is staggering and really, I think, exceeded everyone's expectations in terms of how quickly these PV panels were brought online.
Monique, these are problems, at least the problem of lack of sufficient power supply, are problems that have plagued the country for years now. One would have thought that municipalities have long been thinking about their sustainability going into the future because consumers were only going to take that situation for so long.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's been a problem that has been at the back of the mind for municipalities for a long time because even when load shedding just started, it impacted their revenue because even if it's just normal load shedding, they lose revenue because they can't sell that power and they don't have that extra amount of money that they put on top of the energy that they resell. So even just load shedding causes them financial strain. And then on top of that, as you've been saying, customers and businesses that do their own PV generation now adds a massive additional strain to municipal purse. Pravin Gordhan, when he reported back to Parliament, said that the data that he got from Buffalo City Municipality, that municipality alone said that they lost 350 million rand this year. And our analysis and our engagements with municipalities have showed that this is really putting a lot of strain on them. And our advice has been to them to try and embrace it rather than to fight it because, as you say, customers are fed up. And we are expecting that the increase in solar is just going to continue for the future. And municipalities we need to navigate around that and to try and incorporate that into their system rather than fight it because it is something that they're going to have to deal with in future.
Monique, what does embracing it mean? We've heard some municipalities saying that, they are entering into private-public partnerships, and this is really around the generation of independent power. We've seen the likes of, the city of Cape Town actually go abroad to try and source financing for projects of that nature. What is it that municipalities should be doing?
Yes, I think our research and our plans that we have developed center around the fact that municipalities would need to do their own generation. So they would need to look at, for instance, renewable energy, which offer them cheap or lower cost tariffs compared to what they can buy from Eskom in future. So if they do their own PV or wind power installations, they could save money that way, and they can support their customers during load shedding and have electricity that they can still sell. And then the other issue or other point that they can take up is offering customers a feed-in tariff where the customers that are already doing their own PV generation and have excess generation that they can sell back into the grid for the municipalities to buy that electricity at a reasonable charge and then to sell that back to customers that don't have their own generation onto the grid. And our analysis have very much showed that could be very favorable to the municipalities and help them to save money in the long term rather than buying electricity solely from Eskom.
There's, of course, been questions around this idea of the state of our grid and the extent to which we can actually onboard power from renewable energy, at least when it comes to suitability. Is that the case when we're talking about power that is produced by households?
Yes, very much so, especially in the southern provinces, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Northern Cape. There's been a lot about that in the media lately, that the transmission grid cannot support any additional renewable energy on the network there. So we are very much expecting that it is going to become a problem in future if too many customers add their own generation to the grid in those provinces specifically. In the northern parts of the country, there's still quite a lot of capacity on the transmission network, so it shouldn't be a problem there. So it is going to be very interesting to see how Eskom navigates this problem and keep the grid stable in those provinces where we're already seeing transmission problems.
So Monique, then what is the potential effect of that?
So it's going to be very interesting to see how Eskom manages it. So what it actually means is that if too many people put their own PV on and put their own generation on, the transmission lines themselves are going to become overloaded. So they're going to run at peak capacity, and those lines physically get too hot, and it causes damage to those lines. So obviously Eskom won't allow that. So they're going to either have to tell customers to shut down their PV generation during periods of high generation in the midday when a lot of people are generating, to keep their lines from failing, because they'll have protection systems that kick in, and you obviously don't want to get into a situation where a lot of your lines on your network are tripping. And that's what they did in Vietnam. They also had a very attractive feed-in tariff, and they saw a period where they had a massive increase of PV generation, rooftop solar PV being added to the grid, and it got to the point where the government said up to here and no further, these customers will have to shut down their power or their panels during these times in the day, or we'll shut it down for you. So they've got a moratorium on that, where people during certain times of the day or certain periods of the year, they're not allowed to do their own generation anymore, and it could very well become the same situation with South Africa, where the transmission grid just can't handle that amount of power at any point in time, and people would have to shut down their systems.
Oh, Monique, so unfortunate. It seems like you try to fix a problem on one end, but then you end up creating another problem on the other end. But thanks for your insights on that story. Stellenbosch University Center for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies Chief Engineer Monique Roux there.